Thank you for all the staff and sponsors for Connect 4. It's quite a festival, and welcome to day 2. And people call me a polar explorer, but I'm more of an adventurer. I think the turn of the century guys were give them credit for where they went to and how they got there. And I have modern technology now with down jackets and satellite phones, and GPS. But I am bipolar, if you didn't know that. And so I've been traveling to the North and South Pole for almost 20 years, and it's been quite a remarkable journey. They're two very different environments. The Antarctic basically is 9,000 feet, or 3,000 meters, and it's surrounded by water. And the Arctic Ocean is all water, surrounded by land. And so I'm traveling across a moving environment, constantly breaking up, constantly changing, in flux. And so that is always moving, and I'm on about 4 inches to 4 feet of water, 4 feet of ice, and about 3,000 feet of water below me. So two very different environments, but I'm a skier. Do we have any skiers in the room? How about snowboarders? I started as a snowboarder and then moved to skiing, but I spent the last 20 years really trying to find remote places on the planet to really go ski and snowboard. And so it's been fun. I live in Lake Tahoe. I've been into Greenland, in Svalbard, which is above the Arctic Circle, Antarctica. I pioneered all the skiing down there almost 20 years ago. And we do a thing called ski touring, which a lot of you might not be familiar with, but we have skins on the bottom of our skis, and we rope up because there's crevasses everywhere. And we have to go up the hill, and then at the top, we actually peel the skins off and click the heels down, and there's walking modes in the boots, and we're able to ski down. So it's an alpine setup, but we can actually cross-country ski up as well. And I love paddleboarding. Do we have any paddleboarders? So I've been, for the last 20 years, been taking paddleboards as far north as you can take them, in almost 80 degrees north I've been paddling, and also about 65 degrees south as well. But what I'm really passionate about is not so much the exploration, but how we can help out mankind. And one of the things I've been doing is doing live feeds to classrooms around the planet, and mainly the United States and Canada. So I pioneered this technology where I could set up with my BGAN satellite communicator, and there can be 500 kids or 1,000 kids in a large group room, and I can do these live feeds. I usually go and I speak to the kids ahead of time, and then I'll come back, and then we'll do a live feed. And this Adelie penguin happened to just jump up when I was making a dispatch. But it's really fascinating. If you look closely, you can actually see I got an anaconda around my neck, and I do trips to the Amazon, so I invited the zoo to come along, and we did a live feed from the Amazon on several different occasions. We usually go to the Brazilian Amazon in October through February, and that's the best time for fishing. And this is my son, Jackson. He's holding a baby caiman, which is basically a tiny alligator. It's what they have in the Amazon. And we had several other wildlife species as well, a few anaconda, I think we had a couple boas, we had a giant river turtle, sometimes we even have a sloth, and we're able to showcase these to 5,000 students around the United States. So this one actually ended up peeing on Jackson, and he dropped it, and then we release it to nature. But it's quite an educational experience, and the students can ask Jackson questions or myself questions, or the marine biologists that we have on. And we're on a luxury riverboat, and we paddle back and forth and do all kinds of amazing stuff. I have lights for the boards, beautiful. Sometimes the rivers can be almost 2 miles across. And it's really a perfect place to go paddleboarding because the rivers rise almost 40 feet every year. And the indigenous tribes are really good at paddleboarding because they have these little tiny dugout canoes, and their balance is impeccable, and so they have a lot of fun too. And we stop at a few indigenous tribes and they paint our faces and we do some dancing with them, and it's really the real experience. It's not a commercial thing at all, and quite interesting to be able to interact with the native tribes. And this is my son Tan, and we did a little dance with them and had a great time. And you can see this is the shaman and his and some of his tribe called the Desano tribe. And they have a pet sloth. We have pet dogs and cats and gerbils, and so this is their pet. And we also go fishing. This is a fish called an arapaima, and I think this is a fish that can get up even bigger than that. This one was 70 pounds, and I think they can get up to 200 pounds, and it would feed a whole village for several weeks. And there's also piranha. We do a lot of piranha fishing. And we usually make soup out of the piranha, but it actually gives you some interesting dreams. So I stay away from the piranha soup. But there's really prehistoric animals in the Amazon. It's so full of wildlife. This is a freshwater dolphin, and they're very inquisitive. And there's all kinds of caiman. Here's one that we caught at night. We do night excursions. There's manta rays, there's monkeys, there's tarantulas. Here's Jackson with a tarantula. This is a pink-toed tarantula. There's sloth. This is Tan in the group that we had, and we climbed a tree and pulled the sloth out, which is very interesting. And they sort of look like, for people my age, they sort of look like E.T., but they're nocturnal and also herbivores as well. And red-faced monkeys and giant river turtles. Actually, that's a tortoise, I'm sorry. And then just beautiful sunsets. You can actually see the expansion of the rivers. And it takes me what I'm really comfortable at is where the cold is. And I think this was 2003. I had a dream to go climb the highest peak, or the 6th highest peak in the world. And this is it's in the Himalaya, it's in Tibet, and it's called Choi Oyu. And I wasn't very bright. I wanted to go and climb this mountain really without oxygen. There's 14 8,000 meter peaks, and most of them are climbed with oxygen, and most of them with Sherpa help. Sherpas are the indigenous tribes that are really good at altitude, and they can run up the mountains and place your tents and all that stuff. But I decided to do it just with 2 friends, and it wasn't so much a aesthetic thing that I wanted to do out of my own pureness. I wanted to do it because I didn't have the financial backing to be able to go and do this, so I did it on my own. And it was an amazing experience to be able to interact with them. It's right on the Nang Pala, which is the spice route that goes through all the way. A lot of Indians and Indian culture will trying to get exiled and leave China and Tibet to go to India. So these are the yaks bringing our stuff up. So I was able to climb, ski, and snowboard the 6th highest peak in the world. And I also did other mountains in the Himalaya called Amadablam. We didn't ski this, but we ended up climbing it, which is a beautiful, beautiful mountain, which took me to, in 1999, I had a dream to go climb the highest peak in Antarctica. And no one had ever skied or snowboarded it before, so it was something that I really wanted to go and do. But as I started this career of exploration, it was really about myself. It was about how I could get to the summit or get to the pole and beat my chest. And I think what this progression has turned out is how we can all really help out other mankind, whether it be through philanthropic ways or through humanitarian efforts. I think it's a much bigger project than just going to climb mountains for your own personal reasons. It is 16,077 feet. You can see my team of friends. It had never been skied before. The interior of Antarctica only gets about 12 inches of snow a year. And we had an atypical storm that came through and probably put 30 inches of snow on the ground. And so we were skiing some powder. But we ended up going and climbing that mountain in the background called Mount Shin, which is the 6th highest peak. And then the mountain beyond that is the 2nd highest peak of Antarctica called Mount Tyree, and I named my son after that mountain, and I'd like to go back. He's 17 now, and at some time I'd like to go back and climb and ski that. But we skied off the summit in powder, which was awesome. And about 8 months after that journey, I was asked by a Russian who was supposed to guide a blind gentleman and a deaf gentleman to ski from the coast of Antarctica to the South Pole. And this is Miles Hilton Barber. And the Russian just went and asked me, hey, would you like to guide my client to the South Pole? I got injured, I'm not gonna be able to go. I immediately said yes, I love this challenge. I had never done anything like this before, but I ended up doing a lot of research and talking to some of the other polar guides that have done stuff like this before. But really the true thing was not only to have to figure it out how to do it myself, but how was I gonna get this blind gentleman to the South Pole? So I immediately, I think I put a bell on the back of my sled and he could just follow the bell and that would be very easy. The first 5 minutes of the expedition, I looked behind me and Miles is skiing off into the abyss. He couldn't hear the bell because the wind was so strong. So that wasn't gonna work. And so I had to sort of ski next to him and push him around what's called sastrugi. Sastrugi is the undulations in the ice and snow caused by wind. And so I did try to shut my eyes for about maybe 100 meters and I fell over 4 or 5 times. So I really had to give it to Miles for attempting to do something like this. And after about 62 days, 787 miles wearing the same underwear, we arrived at the South Pole. So it was quite a journey to be able to push yourself, to be able to get somebody like that to the South Pole. And I learned a lot about myself, a lot of introspective thought, and certainly I wanted to go do it again. You sort of forget about all the trials and tribulations and the suffering that you do. I think my wife calls me a professional sufferer. And this is a gentleman, a turn-of-the-century explorer named Ernest Shackleton, and he's one of my heroes. And he did a journey in 1909 and got within 97 miles of the South Pole. They would take 4 years to mount an expedition to get to the South Pole. And he wanted to do one of the last great adventures. The North Pole, Admiral Peary had arrived in 1909. And then there was Robert Falcon Scott, that his ill-fated expedition to the South Pole ended in death. And then Amundsen had beaten him in 1911, December 14th. And he had arrived a month before Scott. So Shackleton in 1914 through 1916 put together the Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition. And everyone needs to read this book. It's called Endurance, and that was the name of the boat. And it's an amazing tale of perseverance and just utter amazing leadership. So it's Alfred Lansing is the author. I won't go into the story, but he was unable to make the journey. His boat got crushed, and he was going to do a complete crossing of the Antarctic continent. And so I wanted to go in 2007 and do the journey that he intended to do to see if Shackleton could do this journey. And so I got dropped in the Roni ice shelf right on Berkner Island, this one island right above where it says Roni ice shelf. And I wanted to get dropped off and ski to the geographic South Pole. The South Pole sits pretty much right in the middle of Antarctica. And there is some permanent ice on the Roni ice shelf and also the Ross Sea. And I didn't go by boat. I went in by Hercules C-130 and we landed on an ice runway. And it had a Russian plane that lands on wheels. It doesn't have skis. And then we got on a ski-equipped DC-3 and were able to get dropped off on the coast of where Shackleton would have started this journey. And you look at this picture and you look behind me and they look like mountains, but those are crevasses. And crevasses is where ice is moving across rocks and creating gaps, and what happens, it snows and then you get snow bridges. So if you look closely, you can actually see our track that comes around, and then it was just 2 of us, so I would run ahead and set up a tripod with a timer, and then I'd run back and get in the picture. But we had a lot of whiteout conditions. If you look closely, you can see the flags on my ski pole, so I can make sure that I'm going the right direction. But lots of whiteout, and constantly having to pull up my compass to be able to navigate properly. And we have technology. We're able to update, our Facebook and email, and also our websites to be able to give tracking on where we're going. So that's been a new thing in expeditions in the last 20 years. And you see that I have tape on my nose. It's not because I injured myself, but if the goggles were on there and I was sweating, the goggles would freeze to my face and I would pull off half my nose. So, but and even somebody who has more experience than anyone, I still make mistakes. And 3 days before that I took this picture, I was chewing on a piece of chocolate, and just imagine living in a freezer at -40, and I was chewing on a piece of chocolate and I broke one of my molars. And so I had to pull that out with a Leatherman or a needle nose plier. So I have some gauze where my tooth used to be. And then on this day, I was skiing, and all of a sudden, I couldn't see out of my goggles because I was sweating, and I put the goggles on top of my head. And for 2.5 hours, I was skiing. And then in the evening, my eyes completely, I couldn't see. It was almost like sandpaper. Every time I would blink, I couldn't produce any tears because the tears were freezing. So what I did is I ended up getting what's called snow blindness. And it's really painful for about a week. And so I put a patch on one eye, and the other one, you can see how red it is. But the show must go on. You have to still get there. And so I spent more goggles pretty much the whole time. But 3 more days, we ended up at the geographic South Pole. We did this journey, 737 miles in 47 days. So we did the Shackleton route, and I do think that Shackleton would have been able to do it. He would have had dogs. We do a thing called man hauling, which we just haul our own sleds, but I think he would have been able to do it. The South Pole has a scepter at the South Pole, and it is where all the meridians meet, where all the time zones meet. So it's where our Earth is spinning on. And the ice does move, and they put a new scepter there every year. And so it moves about 30 feet or about 10 meters every year. And it's not so much the pole is moving, but the ice sheet is moving.
If you walk around that counterclockwise, do you get when you're younger every time?
I wish. I wish, but you can be in every time zone in about 3 seconds. And they're doing some great science. If I had some more time, I could tell you about some of the science work they're doing at the geographic South Pole. But this is, you might have heard of the South Beach diet, but this is the South Pole diet, because I ended up eating a couple tubes or a couple quarts of Ben & Jerry's and a whole chicken and whatever to try to gain weight. I think at the beginning of this journey, I weighed 217 pounds, and at the end, I weighed about 174. So you're burning over 10,000 calories, 8 to 10,000 calories a day, and you're only eating 5,556. So it's impossible to continue to keep the weight on. And you see I got my patch on and missing a tooth and had to shave my head because I don't bring a comb or anything either. Yeah, and same underwear. Well, I usually I turn it inside out about every 7 days. And this is a friend of mine. This is Grant Corrigan and Shauna Corrigan, and they came to me in 2012. In 2010, Grant was in a snowmobile accident in the Sonora Mountains of California, and he was trying to do a big jump and then land on a transition, and he ended up breaking his back. And the doctors said he would never walk again. His wife married him about 2 months before that accident. She stood by him really when he couldn't walk for himself. But he wanted to do extraordinary things. He was healing. He was wanted to do 120% recovery. So he's been training 9 hours a day to be able to do stuff. So he wanted to ski to the South Pole, and I said, okay, we need to develop a sit ski. So we designed a sit ski for him so he could sit, and he pushed 76 miles to the geographic South Pole. And now there's a movie. I think we've been doing the small film festivals. It's called The Push Is On, and we've been winning a bunch of awards for this film that we made about extraordinary humans that do extraordinary things. And it's not about his disability, it's about his ability. And he wanted to walk the last 100 meters through the original 12 Antarctic Treaty Country flags. And so I gave him my skis and I helped him along, and he's crying as he's moving through the cloud or through the flags. And he says, I wish my wife was here to see this moment. And we secretly flew her in. So I guess I gave the ending of the film away, but anyway, Shauna was there. This is an interesting expedition where I drove an Arctic truck all the way across Antarctica, all the way from departure, all the way to the race start. And I've done this several times. It's pretty boring. And we use this truck, a 6x6 Arctic truck, to be able to go across. It is a little bit more efficient, doesn't use as much fuel. We do use diesel fuel to be able to get there, so it is an interesting thing. But I took a 18-year-old from the coast to the pole, and we wanted to do it really, really fast. And so we were doing science work along the way. We were digging huge pits, would take about 2 hours to dig, and then we were taking isotope samples, as well as making sure that the snow science that we were doing was helpful for the scientists. So we were collecting snow samples. We also were doing core samples as well. So this is really cool to be able to help scientists figure out more about what's going on with climate change. And we needed to ski to the pole every day. So quite an interesting trip to do it with an 18-year-old. And this is really an unusual picture because usually you have big jackets on, and because this day it was probably about 0 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius, which is basically 32 degrees. And that rarely happens at the South Pole. You're at 3,000 meters. It was probably a little bit below freezing because you could see my sweat freezing on my shirt, but it was a rarity that scientists haven't seen in a really, really long time, to have these warmer temperatures on the polar plateau. And after 18 days, 4 hours and 43 minutes, we arrived at the geographic South Pole. The previous record was about 24 days. So we took off about 6 days from that trip. And then I met another handicapped guy. His name is Aaron Anderson. He's from Sweden. He rolled up the top of Kilimanjaro, but he came to me, and he's an athlete, around 30 years old, and he wanted to do a trip from the coast of Antarctica, the same one that Parker and I did, the 18-year-old. And I said, yeah, let's see if we can do it. And this was 500 miles that we were doing, that we did in 18 days. So it was pretty remarkable for him. We designed a sit ski for him, a little bit different than the one we had before. And then my sled, I think, weighed over 370 pounds. And we had to climb 9,000 feet in the first 7 days. So a little ambitious, but we got dropped off at the edge of the ice shelf. And it took us 24 days to be able to get to the South Pole. And quite an amazing journey. This was just 2 Decembers ago. And my company, I look for unique trips around the world to do. There's going to be a solar eclipse in Antarctica at this one penguin rookery that I know of. And it'll be on December 4th, 2021. So I'm planning to bring about 40 people to this solar eclipse that's going to happen. And we have 24 hours of sunlight, so it should be really interesting to see how these emperor penguins react to this total darkness for about 1 minute 48 seconds, and that's all it is. But we'll have a gourmet chef. I also have fat tire bikes. This is interesting because I did this in 2003, which I designed this fat tire bike, and Time Magazine has said it's one of the top 30 inventions of 2004, and also the bike is in the Smithsonian Institute as well. So I went around pretty much the Heritage Range, about 300 miles by myself. And we also run, we're starting to run this year for the first time ever, fat tire bikes to the South Pole. So we'll have support and be able to do about 100 miles to the South Pole. And they also run ski trips down there. I'm usually on this boat called the Clipper Adventure, and we take 130 skiers across the roughest sea in the world, which is the Drake Passage. And I've done this passage about 50 times. And I've been in small sailboats, I've been in big boats, I've been in yachts and all kinds of stuff. So it's been about half, it's been Drake Lake and half have been Drake Shake. But it is an adventure to get there, and I think that's what's really special about Antarctica. It's really one of these places that's really difficult to get to, whether it's weather, whether it's rough seas, whether it's hard to get into. But once you get there, this inner beauty is really unsurmountable. And I take my wife to go skiing, and we had a great time, and I think she's going to come back this year with me as well. I took my son, but we take about 130 skiers there every year, and we'd use this little Zodiac to get to shore, and it is one of these remarkable places that I think is really still untouched and pure. And a lot of the time when you're in these Zodiacs, you hear the ice releasing CO2 from it, so from 50,000 years ago. So it's really quite an energy vortex to be able to travel around these really new and remote ice features. Just fascinating. And then there's chinstrap penguins, and I think that's what's key about this, is really to be able to ski down to wildlife is just remarkable. Gen 2 penguins, Gen 2s, they do these little highways, and they all follow each other. This is an Adelie chick. And the three species that I showed you, the chinstrap, the Adelie, and the Gen 2, they get about the same size. They're about 2.5 to 3 feet tall, and they weigh about 40 pounds. So these are all chicks, and they grow up pretty fast. It just takes them a little bit of time for them to lose all their feathers before they can go hunt for themselves. So this is a Gen 2 chick, and you can see the barbs inside their beaks, and that's what they do. They swim through the water and collect krill, and the whole ecosystem is relying on krill. And I have been seeing changes in the actual water temperatures, which is affecting krill populations, which is infecting Gen 2s. All these penguin species that I just showed you, they mate for life. They have the same mate for life, and they also go to the same place to breed. And so I'm seeing penguin rookeries actually moving to new locations for the first time ever because of climate. And this is a mom or dad regurgitating krill into the chick. And can you tell which one's the chick? And so I think the chick wants a little bit more food. And then there's leopard seals, and you can see these actually eat penguins. And you can see this one's a little bit beat up, probably from just trying to have a penguin survive. And this is just from a little GoPro camera that was right underneath my Zodiac. And another one. But they look like a head of a snake almost, with big eyes. There's another leopard seal. And there's also elephant seals too, and they have really interesting mating habits because they have about 30 girlfriends. And they have to just hang out on the beach, and then another male will approach the beach and they will actually fight. And if you look at this one, he's pretty beat up. And the winner of that battle will actually retain the harem, and he'll have 30 girlfriends instantly. But you can see how beat up some of them get. And there's all kinds of whales as well. These are killer whales. There's 3 different types of species of killer whales. And there's humpback whales. And we found really cool ice caves. Here's Alexa looking in the ice cave, and that was a couple years ago. That was actually a couple years prior to this one, and you can see how the ice is constantly moving and closing up. And just beautiful scenery to be able to get up above and see really the true beauty and the pristineness of these amazing places. And you can see our boat in the background. And then we do some skiing, and usually the skiing is pretty mellow, but we do have a couple of hotshot skiers like Chris Davenport from Aspen descending some more technical terrain with some cameramen. But beautiful rock spires and stuff too. Yeah, one slip and he's in the water. And then we did some parapenting, or they call it speed flying as well, which is a lot of fun. And then we do the polar plunge. And the water is about 33 degrees, so you can see the icebergs. You gotta make sure there's no icebergs that you're gonna land in. And just beautiful sunsets as well. And I also do trips to a place called Svalbard, which is above the Arctic Circle, and you might have heard of the seed bank. And Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has put some money toward the seed bank, which has about 2,500 seeds in it. And in case there's a catastrophic disaster on our planet, they can regrow these seeds. And it's cryogenically frozen. Just 2 years ago, there was a scare because the permafrost that all these cryogenically seeds are frozen in started to melt, and there was water in there. So just shows you, I've been seeing quite a bit of climate change. This is one of the places that I went pioneering skiing in the early 2000s, where no one else in the world has been to skiing. And it's been a remarkable place, but it is an archipelago with about 3,000 islands. And what's unique about this place is they have 3,000 polar bears and more snowmobiles than people. There is a university there. We do sailboat trips there. We get on Zodiacs and go to shore just like we did. But I gotta carry a gun because of the polar bears. And this is a perfect example of biomimicry, because I think the female polar bears are much smarter than the males. They actually dig a cave, and they'll give birth to 2 to 3 cubs every 2 or 3 years. The males just do a walking slumber, and they stay out in the weather for about 2 months, where they lower their metabolism and they'll just sleepwalk. But the little polar bears that are only 2-month-old, they're pretty cute, but they certainly are the only mammal that hunts man. And we do some skiing, and we do have to carry a gun, but just some beautiful terrain to be able to ski down to the water, and back to the sailboat, and we do some paddleboarding as well. But there are walrus as well, super interesting, and they are huge. And there's also, this is what the polar bears eat. This is what's called a bearded seal, and they have to breathe. They can only stay underwater for about 22 minutes. So they go underneath the water, and they always make like an air hole all winter long, and they use their nose to be able to break through the thin ice, but they do have really strong claws that they can claw and actually make a bigger hole. And this is just a pup. And there's also reindeer. They usually have big racks, and they'll lose their antlers every year as well. So, and we're skiing down, and just amazing. Got to carry a gun, of course, and also do trips to Iceland as well, and ski in Iceland, which is fantastic as well. Similar fjords, similar skiing, but I have seen a lot of climate change there. Also Greenland. I do trips in Greenland as well. And Greenland's a really interesting place because it's truly an early warning sign, just like the Arctic Ocean, of climate change. And what's happening is Greenland is 80% ice. And so it's all one big ice cap, and everybody lives on the coast. There's about 56,000 people that live there, and it's run by Denmark. Denmark helps them out a little bit, but truly an amazing place to go. I crossed Greenland in 2004 using kites, and it took me like 20 days to go across. And just beautiful northern lights, and just the skiing is fantastic too there. And there's dog sleds. And it brings me to 2005, where this is the turning point really in my life where I got involved in climate change. And I wanted to ski to the geographic North Pole. There's only about 30 people in the history of mankind that have actually skied both poles from the coast. So it's a pretty new sport, I guess you want to call it, or a new objective. And I just didn't want to go to do it myself. I didn't want to go and just beat my chest and say, hey, I made it to the North Pole. I wanted to ask climate change scientists, how can I help out? What can I do? And so they handed me this 50-pound box. And you know about, well, you don't know, but I wear the same underwear. I cut my toothbrush in half. I cut my labels out of my clothing to try to save weight. So this 50-pound box was not going to work. And so I put my thinking cap on, and I redesigned basically these science instruments, which I call beacons, and they basically track the ice, and they also do temperature and barometric pressure, and they ping up data to a satellite in the Alfred Wenger Institute in Germany. So I made them about 6 pounds. And now the Arctic Buoy program is using a beacon I designed, which is awesome, and really gave me a standing ovation for the science that I brought to climate research. And I'm all the way on the left, and this is at the North Pole, with my friend who's Dutch and a Norwegian on the right as well. And we placed 3 of these, but every day we would ski for 14 hours, and we would do science work for about an hour, hour and a half afterwards. So the last thing you want to do is, after being out there skiing, is to go out and do science work. But it was really important for me and my team to be able to collect this data to make sure it was accurate. And we got dropped off with a helicopter at the end of the Arctic Ocean in Siberia, a place called Cape Archichesky. And the ice, typical Arctic Ocean, constantly moving and breaking up. Very interesting. This is a fairly fresh lead that's frozen, but within 7 or 8 hours, sometimes the ice will be, or the water will freeze, and you're able to go over it with skis, even with a 300-pound sled. And this is what it looks like in Canada on a different trip. All the multi-year ice, when I say multi-year, I'm talking 7 to 14 years old, has been pushed down to the Baffin Straits, which is near Canada and Greenland. And so this is what it looks like. We had 2 sleds, and it took me almost 3 weeks to go about 25 miles. And so very difficult to get through there. This is sort of what you have to do. You basically have to take your skis off and go up over bolted rubble. Sometimes we're jumping leads. Sometimes we use the sleds to be able to get across. We can even ski across them. Sometimes we just do, about 12 times a day, I'll put a dry suit on and just swim. I didn't really like to do this because you're very vulnerable in the water, and the polar bears are very good swimmers. But another typical swimming, and then we help each other as a team. And a couple of years ago, the GPS didn't even register 90 degrees north, and it was 89.59999, and now they have GPS that actually register 90 degrees north. It's constantly moving. It's pretty much like, okay, come on over here, we're at the pole. And I started this thing called Impact School about 15 years ago, but I'm really excited about it because I just launched it this year. And we do high school educational field trips to the Sierras, to the Redwood Forest. We have 9 different offerings where high school students can come along with us and on these journeys for about 3 weeks, and they can get university credit. So we have professors and PhDs that come along. We do the Arctic Wildlife Refuge. We did one this summer where we live in an Inuit village, and the students learn about environmental sciences. We do, this is in Bhutan. We're going to do one in Bhutan in October called Gross National Happiness. And so the students be able to go and experience these amazing places and learn about their environments and learn about what's going on. And we do one for policy as well in Washington, D.C. So you can check out isacs.org or isacsimpactschool.org and learn more about it. And also, this is if you want to learn more about, people ask me, what can they do? I think this is one of the key things that you can do is you can text, I will vote. I'm an ambassador for Protect Our Winners, which is a real ski industry-based nonprofit to really to fight climate change. And all this does is help you find out who is up for voting and where you can register. So if anybody wants to, if they're not registered, please go out and vote in November. I think it's one of the key things, along with the educational process, is really get out there and put your vote on November 7th.